Things just took a shocking turn as an insider has just dropped a massive trade report surrounding one Leafs defenseman in particular that has fans fired up. We're going to break down that report and discuss what this means going forward as things continue to escalate surrounding the Leafs and a trade. But before you get into it all, if you're part of the percentage who aren't subscribed to the channel, you guys have been absolute beasts with the support lately. 71% of you who are watching right now aren't subscribed. So make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you guys again for your continued support over here. Darius, a lot to go over today. A big report has dropped. We've been talking about Nazem Kadri now for the past few days, and really, like I mentioned before, dating back to the trade deadline this past season. But we're now going to be talking about Nazem Kadri a little bit, but Morgan Rielly, as a new report has dropped from Nick Kyprios, revealing that Morgan Rielly, he spoke out on him potentially moving. I would bet the Leafs have had conversations with his representation about possibly moving. The sense that I get is, I wouldn't say no shot, but I'd say not right now. So pretty big info here. Now, of course, I don't know if the Leafs are necessarily throwing him out there in a ton of trade talks. What Nick Kyprios is saying is, among all these trade talks that are being had right now and are happening, Morgan Rielly is not a name that can be ruled out of trade talks. And for a guy like Morgan Rielly, who has been a Leaf forever, essentially, for his whole career, very interesting one. But I also, you think back to the Elliot Friedman tweet and report from a few weeks ago prior to, all the big NHL moves going down. The Leafs are still looking to actively shop a defenseman. So things are starting to line up here, and just another report confirming that not only are they shopping defensemen, Morgan Rielly could be on the move.
Well, the plot thickens. We know that the Toronto Maple Leafs want to add into their top six. Brad Treliving came out and said that they are going to do that, and they're going to do that via trade this summer. So I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that, the Leafs have gone to Morgan Rielly's camp and been like, hey, listen, like, we're going to be very active this summer. There's a real world where maybe, and maybe not in these words, but listen, there's a real world that you could be moved this offseason. How do you kind of feel about that? Would you be open to moving? Where would you want to go? Stuff like that. Like, I'm sure it hasn't progressed to that, but I'm sure they've let them know, like, hey, we're going to be very active this offseason. So it could make some sense, right? And it really depends on who's coming back, what trade or what team you're trading with, right? But it could make some sense. The Leafs decor has not been this good, I would argue, ever in the history of this team, this deep. And Morgan Rielly is a part of that. That is a fact of the matter. He's part of it, right? I do think that if you move him out, you're going to need to get whether it's in the same trade or another trade, you're going to need to get a pretty solid defenseman back because he has NHL experience, right? Can't just like lose Morgan Rielly and then expect to go into the season with the same decor and have it be okay. You're going to need at least another defenseman, even if it's not in the same trade. But yeah, I do think that, this probably could happen this offseason, that they at least look at it because there's a real possibility he doesn't bounce back. I do think he will. And I think that, ultimately he probably will stay at Toronto Maple Leaf. But again, there is a real world where he doesn't bounce back. And I think the Leafs are looking at that and going, listen, he's 30 right now. And, he has a lot of years left on this deal. Do we move off of him? The other thing I want to mention before we move on is, Morgan Rielly makes 7.5 for Morgan Rielly. Makes no sense if he's not playing on the power play. You can't have a $7.5 million defenseman that plays 5-on-5, right? And maybe some penalty kill minutes. It doesn't make sense. But now with Mitch Marner gone, if he does get added to the power play again, hasn't really looked good with him on the power play. But if you can get it to a level where it's serviceable, the power play looks good again, and he's playing on it, that at least looks better. Now, okay, he's earning, obviously all of his money. It could make sense where he's playing in different situations. That makes more sense to me. But as it stands right now, where he's playing majority of his minutes 5-on-5 for 7.5, doesn't really make too much sense. And it's something they have to look at.
Yeah, I mean, you look at their projected cap space, $5 million. We know they're actively in talks for a trade. We'll dive into it, not a mock trade, but some reports in a minute. You mentioned it. I mean, Morgan Rielly, is he worth $7.5 million right now? Probably not. Is it like a negative contract? I don't know if I would consider it like a huge detriment contract or anything like that. $7.5 million. He hasn't been playing the power play, but he's also probably going to see an increased role on the power play and offensively in general here with Mitch Marner now gone. Of course, obviously he's a defenseman. They want to trade, at least they've been in talks about, they're not hesitant to trade a defenseman. I think they probably have had the talk with Morgan Rielly where if a good deal comes up, I can't imagine Brad Treliving, who was willing to trade Mitch Marner, of course, but very different scenario, but he was willing to make, a shocking move. He would be willing to do that again. And there's been a lot of rumblings lately about, the Leafs acquiring Nazem Kadri. And I saw this tweet here and it's very interesting. There's also some reports on it as well. The Leafs moving on for Morgan Rielly in exchange for Nazem Kadri, because the Flames, they're trying to move off of Rasmus Andersson. We know, we covered it rather yesterday about Nazem Kadri being willing to, or may have been actually willing to actually get traded to the Leafs, but not necessarily requesting a trade. Things keep lining up and more reports that come out, started with Freeman, all these different things. I don't hate the idea, but again, you would have to replace the defensive, hole that would leave with Morgan Riley, whether you like him or not. There's not many players out there right now easily available that could do what Morgan Riley does, whether for better or for worse at sometimes, offensively, defensively. It would be a very interesting swap because you look at the Flames' defensive core and they could use someone like Morgan Riley.
Yeah, and you can bust this trade, wide open if you really wanted to maybe look at Rasmus Anderson as well. That would help, obviously, with the swap for Morgan Riley. But, there were reports recently that he wanted to go to Vegas. He'd be open to being traded to Vegas. Rasmus Anderson, I think the door's closed on that with Mitch Marner going there now. So, is there a world where maybe he'd be open to coming to Toronto? I'm not so sure about that, but that's something you could look at. The other thing that, we haven't mentioned in this video, but of course everybody knows, I don't think Calgary is very enthused about trading with the Toronto Maple Leafs and Brad Treliving in general. So that's a whole nother thing. That's a whole nother story. But in terms of Nazem Kadri for Morgan Riley, it could make some sense. Their salaries essentially cancel each other out. Of course, Morgan Riley is younger and plays a different position, and you would have to go out and get a defenseman after that. But it could make some sense for this team depending on how the lineup kind of shakes out. So obviously there's been reports, for anyone who missed it, we covered in a previous video, that, Nazem Kadri is not asking for a trade out of Calgary. He likes it being a Flame. He wants to be in Calgary. That's where he signed. Brad Treliving signed him to that contract. But if there were a trade, he has a no movement clause. If there were, a trade that came up and it was Toronto, there have been reports that he would waive his no movement clause to come back to Toronto. So it's pretty interesting. Again, just an idea thrown out there. Maybe Morgan Riley for, Nazem Kadri. Maybe you make the trade a little bit more. I don't even know if a trade like this would go through with Calgary because of Brad Treliving, which is unfortunate. But I think things are heating up, and I think they're taking a look at everything. And, a DNA change is not just the personnel on the team. I think it is the personnel on the team a little bit, but it's not just that. It's the mindset going into next season. It's the fact that you're not handing out no movement clauses, like nothing anymore. I like that. So I think things are changing heading into next season. I feel like, a lot of these things will linger for a little bit, but ultimately this team will look different, I think, on day one.
Yeah, I like, I have full faith in Brad Treliving being able to trade Morgan Riley if that's what's best for the team. He's kind of shown an ability now to, I don't think he's necessarily, and that's the biggest difference between him and Kyle Dubas. He's not, drawn to a bunch of players on this team in the sense of he's not stuck with them. He's not going to, they only were going to sign John Tavares if he takes a hometown discount, and that's what they did. He took a huge hometown discount. Ultimately, they kept him. Matthew Neisner, obviously, always going to keep him. They let Mitch Marner walk, and of course, he was going to leave anyway, but they tried to trade him at the deadline. I don't know if previous front office regimes would have done that just because of the optics, all these different things. Brad Treliving's shown an ability now to make that shocking move, and that's something that is exciting as a Leafs fan, whether or not you agree with the move, and whether or not you agree Morgan Riley should be on the move. As much as we have seen countless bad turnovers in playoff runs, countless bad turnovers in games, he is an overall positive value player. You can look at his advanced analytics, you can look at the stuff. He is solid overall. Has he had down years recently? Absolutely. Is he worth $7.5 million? I wouldn't say so. But there's a lot of teams out there like the Flames and many other teams that can use a puck-moving defenseman, a goal-scoring defenseman, and kind of a quarterback defenseman like Morgan Riley. So it's going to be interesting to see what Brad Treliving does. I have full faith in him. We'll keep you up to date every step of the way. Let us know down below what your thoughts are. See you later.